Now that we're able to check in and out, let's update our UI a little bit, showing a very basic empty state when nobody's there, showing a loading spinner when we're pulling in all the faces, and updating our button to this red you see when we're checked in. Before we get into all that, in our location detail view model, in our update check-in status function, I made notes on this when I was editing, but I want to fix it here now. We create this profile on line 66. Like I said in the last video on the edit, we just need this in the success case. I put it out here like in everything. We don't need it in everything. So I'm going to cut that, put it in the success case, and do let record. That way we're using the record that we get back in the success case. Because the reason we need it in multiple places is just because we need it here in the checking in and here when we're checking out. Okay, so on to the main point of the video. If we go to the location detail view, the first thing we're going to do is create just a super simple, basic empty state. And we're going to do that in place of our scroll view if we don't have anything in our checked in profiles array. So we can do that real quick here with a simple if statement. So we'll do if view model.checkedInProfiles.is empty. That is true. Here's where we're going to, empty state. We'll come back to that in a second. Else, let's bring our scroll view up into that else, right? So if it's empty, we're going to show our empty state. If it's not empty, we're going to show our scroll view full of faces. Now this empty state, I'm just going to do a simple text with an emoji. If you wanted to have some images and some design and get extra fancy, that's something you can do to go above and beyond. But like I always say, I gotta cut the scope of this course in some places so it's not incredibly long. So, okay, so here's the basic empty state we're gonna use. It'll be text of nobody's here, and then we'll do sad. Cool, and then that is going to be dot bold. Font will be dot title 2. Foreground color, we'll do dot secondary just to give it that kind of like grayed out look. And then if we run this, we'll see where it shows up. I'll pick a place that has nobody checked in. Okay, locations, not checked into original Joe's. Okay, who's here? Nobody's here. You see it's pushed all the way up to the top because we have a spacer down there. Now my initial thought was to put a spacer above it to center it, but it just didn't look right. Like in the loading view, it looked like it was a little too low. So this was just my pure subjective design idea. If you disagree, that's fine. Do it differently. No big deal. I decided to do padding dot top of 30. So it pushes it down a bit. I will run that and show you. And the reason that I didn't want to try to center it is because, right now we're on the iPhone 12 Pro, pretty long phone, but there's other phone sizes, right? There's the iPhone 8 that's not as long. So I didn't want to have too much padding up top because on other phone sizes, it won't look that great. But 30, again, it pushed it down a little bit, and it still looks, to me, that looks like a fine empty state that nobody's here, and it's not too low. So anyway, that's just a subjective design choice. If you don't like it, do it different. Okay, so we'll stop that. That is our basic empty state. And like I said, if you wanted to go above and beyond, put any view you want in there, get some images, all that good stuff. But now let's talk about our loading view that we want to show, while we're pulling in the faces. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to put the loading view like on top of this bottom section. So for that, I'm going to put all this stuff in a Z stack, and then on top of that Z stack, I'm going to slap the loading view, if we are in the is loading state. And I'm doing this intentionally because in a lot of cases, there will be faces there, and I like being able to see through the faces in the background while we're loading the new ones. Again, it's a stylistic choice I'm making. There are other ways to do this, of course, but that's why I did this, just like to give you the rationale. Z stack, right? And then like I said, I'm going to put this whole bit, Command X, into the Z stack, and then the top layer of the Z stack will be a if is loading. It would be view model is loading, but I don't think we've made that yet. View model.is loading. Nope, we haven't made that yet. So let's delete this, go to our view model up top, again, at published var is loading equals false to start. And then I'm going to get my little helper functions here. Let's go to our profile view model down here. Remember these little things here? Copy those, and I will paste those into my location detail view model because, again, I like to use these simple little things just as readability rather than saying is loading is true, is loading is false. I like the readability of show loading view, hide loading view. We've discussed that before. But now that I have is loading, I need to show and hide it when I want to do that. So down here in get checked in profiles, right away when I call this, I want to show the loading view. And then once I get it back, after we do our switch statement stuff, which we haven't shown our alert yet. We'll do that at the end of this video. I want to hide loading view after I've done what I need to do. Do Command B. So now that we have our is loading set up, back in our location detail here, I'll scroll up a little bit. I can do if view model.is loading, and I'm gonna do this on one line because we have already created our loading view, right? Where we're using that loading view that we built before. Let me clean up some spaces real quick. A quick recap, right? We have this overall Z stack where we have the, if it's empty, we're showing our empty state. If we have faces, we're showing our faces. And then while we're loading, we're slapping a loading view on top of that. That's the gist of what's going on. Okay, so let's test that real quick. Again, this is just our initial implementation of it. See if we have the general gist of it working. So in locations, go to Chipotle. You saw it probably real quick because my internet's pretty fast here. Popped up there. If I check in, there's Sean. Go to the map. Come back to locations. There you go. You saw the loading spinner. We'll go map, loading spinner, map, loading spinner. Okay, I know there's a way I can slow down my network connection to really illustrate that, but you got the point. It's just a loading spinner. So, okay, so that is working as intended. Now let's talk about this red check-in button that you see here in the design. Well, when we load this screen, we need a way to check the checked-in status of the profile. So we know, if they're already checked in, we show the red button. If they're not checked in, we show the green one, right? And then we can update it accordingly when they're actually tapping it. But like I said, the user can go off and use the app and come back to the screen, and we want that button to, be up to date. So what we're going to do on the onAppear of the location detail view is create a function that basically goes out and checks the status of if the user is checked in to this location or not. So for that, let's minimize our bottom console there, go to the location detail view model, and I'm going to put this one kind of at the top because this is one of the first things, we do when we open up the screen. Again, I like to, as best I can, order my functions in like the order that they happen. Again, I can't always do it perfectly, but I try my best to do that just so you have an idea of why I'm ordering it this way. Func get checked in status, and open and close the curly braces here. And it's pretty similar to update checked in status, except, in update checked in status, we need to handle checking in, checking out. Really, we're just getting it. So it's gonna be similar to this, but not the same. So I may be pulling a little bit from there. The first thing we wanna do, because, we're gonna have to fetch the record to check it. So I'm gonna need the profile record ID. So the first thing here, right, is basically the same check here, except we're not gonna show an alert. And the reason being, so I'm gonna put this all in one line, is remember, our user has the option to create a profile. They can use dub-dub-grub without creating a profile. They just can't have all the check-in, check-out functionality. So when we try to get this checked-in status, it's perfectly reasonable that they don't even have a profile. So if that is nil, we just want to return, right? We don't want to show an error message because there's no error. Like they intentionally don't have a profile. So we're going to fail silently there. And then now we want to fetch record. I'm not going to copy and paste this because there's a lot of extra stuff going on with the checked in and check out. So I will retype it, but we're essentially doing the very similar stuff here. Cloud kit manager.shared.fetch record. And then the record ID is our profile record ID. Completed, hit return, type result. And we're going to switch off the result, and then I'm going to let Xcode yell at me. We've done this 1,000 times now. Command B. Yep, give me my cases. Okay, now in the success case, I want access to the record. Let record, because I need to see if I'm checked into this location on the record. So we'll say if let reference equals record, and then again, we'll pull the key value pair, right? What we've been doing before, DDG profile.k is checked in, and that is casted as a CK record.reference. So essentially what we're saying here is, hey, does the is checked in property on our DDG profile have a reference, right? Because if it doesn't, it'll be nil if it does. So if we have a reference, that's what we do here in the if let case. I'll write it out simply at first, and then we'll write it in a more concise way. So we would say if reference.record ID equals location dot ID. That means we are checked into this specific location. So we'll say is checked in equals true. And then else we will say is checked in equals false. And we'll implicitly capture self here. Okay, let's do some print statements to test this real quick. So we'll say print is checked in equals true. And we'll copy, paste that to make this false, just to test to make sure we're doing this. So let's run it on the iPhone 12 Pro. What is wrong? I have placeholder. Cool. Print failed to fetch record. Okay, now we'll run it. I can't remember where I was checked in at. Chipotle, that's always the go-to. Okay, I am in there. And guess what? Sean forgot to call the function. Surprise, surprise. Okay, so I am checked into Chipotle. That's why I just wanted to confirm where I was checked in at. That's all. So back to the location detail view. On appear, we already have, okay. Oh, man, we got to make this a 2-liner. Life's rough. Life is rough. View model.get checked in status. And this is fine to be firing these off 2 separate network calls that are going off concurrently. The order in which they come back doesn't matter because one of them is like getting the profiles to list, and here we're just getting the checked in status to update like the button. So there's no like race conditions to worry about or anything like that. So anyway, now let's run it, and I should be checked into Chipotle. So when I load Chipotle, we should see in our bottom console down here is checked in. So moment of truth, Chipotle. Okay, is checked in is true. Okay, I'm making updates from the background thread somewhere. We'll fix that. That's fine. But you see, is checked in equals true. Now, if I press the check in, check out button, that's not really testing what we did because that's like we'll handle that differently. So I'm going to check out. Okay, cool. I'm checked out, but you can see checked in, checked out successfully. Nobody's here. So now when I navigate away, we'll go back. And then now when I go to Chipotle, I don't see anything. I forgot to do something. So, okay, stop. Back to the location detail view. Okay, so let's put this switch statement here in dispatch queue.main.async. That obviously wasn't the mistake I made, but you know we're gonna have to do this anyway. Command X, Command V, cool. Okay, so the mistake I made was right in this if let. So basically this if let here is checking if I have a reference. Well, if this is nil, I'm not handling the else case. So when I go to a place I'm not checked in at, it will be nil. So that's why nothing is happening. The else I'm handling is if the location ID doesn't match. But there's a bigger else here on this if let, right? If it's nil. If this reference is nil, I'm not doing anything. So here I need to do else is checked in equals false. And then I got to put a print statement to let me know that it is, in fact, is checked in equals false. And I'll even say like reference is nil, just to differentiate the two, just to be sure it's firing off the right one. Cool. I can't remember if I'm checked in or checked out. I know I'm not checked into AC Kitchen and Lounge. Cool. Is checked in is false, right? Reference is nil. You see that? Okay, let's go back to Chipotle. Okay, I wasn't checked in, is checked in, reference is nil. So now let's check into Chipotle. Cool, checked in, checked out successfully. Navigate away from Chipotle, navigate to Chipotle. Is checked in is true. Okay, I'll check out. Cool, checked out successfully. Back, go back to Chipotle. Is checked in as false because reference is nil. Great. Okay. So our check is working accordingly. Now we have to update the UI based on that. But before we do that, and before I forget the real reason, okay, we can get rid of these print statements. We know those are working for now. And then, like I said, this if else, I wrote this as a simple way just to really show you, but we can write this as a quick little one-liner. I'll put it here to show you here. We can do is checked in equals reference dot record ID equals location dot ID. Right, so if reference record ID equals location ID, checked in will be true. If this does not equal that, checked in will be false. So I can get rid of this very basic if else statement down to one line, and that cleans it up a bit. Okay, so let's handle our button changing color and image accordingly. So location detail view, this one's actually quite simple. If we scroll up to our buttons here, and by the way, this view is getting quite long. At least it feels that way. I guess if you look here, it's only 111 lines. I know many of you have probably written view controllers way longer than that, but it still feels long. I feel like we need to come back and handle this at a later date. But anyway, go to our buttons here, right? So here is our check-in status button. You can see we are already like updating our action based on view model is checked in. Well, now we just need to update our appearance based on view model that is checked in. And for sanity here, we're going to put these parameters on different lines here because we're going to do a lot here. View model that is checked in. If that is true, again, we're using the ternary operator. Like I said, if you're kind of new to Swift UI, you're going to use ternary operators like this a lot. So if you're not used to using ternary operators, I would say get used to it. So if viewModel.is checked in, whoops, I need a question mark there, not a colon. I guess I'm not used to using ternary operators. If that is true, like we're checked in, we want to show the red version, right? Because if we're already checked in, the button action should be check out, right? So if that is true, our color is going to be .grub red. And then now here comes the colon, right? So the way this reads, if we are checked in, the color of the button is grub red. If we are not checked in, it is brand primary, which is the green. Cool, now we just need to update the image accordingly. So again, we'll just copy and paste this first part, Okay, so if we are checked in, we don't want to show the person fill check mark. We want to show the person fill, it's called X mark. I'll spare you me looking it up on SF Symbols, but you can look it up on SF Symbols if you want, but I just know it's person fill X mark to get the X. So again, the way this reads, viewModel.isCheckedIn. If we are checked in, we want to show red with the X mark. If we're not checked in, we want to show the green with the check mark, indicating that we will be checked in. Okay, let's test this here. Run it. Go to locations. Am I checked in, Chipotle? Apparently not. Okay, so if I check in, there we go. There's my face, and you see the button is turned red, right? Because what's going on here, just a refresher on how Swift UI works, is when we check that, right? If I go to my location detail view model, here we are updating our checked in status, right? And we're updating it to checked in. And here's where we're updating the is checked in variable, right? Based on our checked in status. And then just again, super refresher, because our is checked in is a published variable on an observable object, anytime this changes, it's going to trigger a UI update to whatever's listening. Our location detail view is listening, right? That's why we have our observed object here. So when that happens, it's going to trigger a UI update, and anything that is relying on viewModel.isCheckedIn, for its UI, will update. So that's why our button updates here, because we are, watching that variable and updating the UI accordingly. Again, just a brief overview on how declarative and Swift UI works. But that is why the button is working. Now let's check out and make sure that's working. Cool. I checked out. Bam. The button goes back to green. Check in. Button is red. Now, on the note of this button, if we don't have a profile created, I don't even want to show this button, right? Because if we don't have a profile, I don't want them trying to check in and check out and then having it not work and then them being confused. So if they opted to not even create a profile, we're not going to show this button. So that is actually relatively simple as well. So we'll stop here. And what we're going to do here, and where we're showing our check in, check out button, we can do a simple if let, and we're not going to use the variable, so we can use just the underscore, equal cloud kit manager.shared.profile record ID. Basically, if this has a value, right? Because the if let is the classic Swift, unwrapping of an optional. So basically what's going to happen is this block is only going to execute if we have a value in our profile record ID. And if we have a value in our profile record ID, that means we have a profile. So yes, we want to show our button if we have a profile. So we'll put that in the if let. Now, if we don't have a profile, this block won't even execute. So it's going to be like this button doesn't even exist. Now, in order for me and you to test this, if I run it on the iPhone 12 Pro, I have a profile. It's a pain to log out, log in. So go to a simulator that you haven't used yet. I don't know what that is for you. For me, that's going to be the iPhone 12 mini. That way I know I'm not signed in. I know I haven't used it. So I'm going to run it on the iPhone 12 mini, and this should simulate like a brand new user without a profile. Okay, here we are in dub-dub-grub in light mode, right? Because again, this simulator is not all set up. So yep, there's my onboarding. Let's get rid of that. Okay, yep, I guess I'll allow my location. Cool. Again, this is simulating a brand new user coming in. Let's go to locations. I am not checked into Chipotle, so I'm going to click it. But Sean's checked into Chipotle. But you see, I am not checked in on this user. And then you can see our buttons. We may want to adjust this UI. So maybe that background shrinks according with the buttons. That can be in an optimization section. Again, small UI polish. But you see, somebody that doesn't have a profile cannot even check in or check out. So that's the behavior we want. And to recap here, we'll stop running that. It was a simple optional check on our profile record ID, because the only way we have a profile record ID is if we have a profile. If we have a profile, show the button. If we don't show the button. Okay, I'm going to go back to the iPhone 12 Pro before I forget, even though I don't know if we're going to run it again. Now, the last thing we're going to do in this video is handle all the alerts, which are all in the location detail view model. Let's get rid of that. So I'm going to kind of go down each network call and basically create alerts as we go. So get checked in status. Now this kind of happens in the background, so I may not always want to show an alert. Like we talked about, if I don't have a record ID, don't show an alert, because that may be a perfectly valid use case. The only time I want to show an alert here, because on success case, we're just updating the is checked in, which is in turn updating our button. However, on failure, like if we failed to fetch the record, like we have a record, but we failed to fetch it, I do want to show an alert there, because that's shouldn't happen, right? That's our user has a profile, so they're expecting the UI to behave as if they're checked in or checked out, but that's not happening, obviously, if we get into this failure case. And this failure case will trigger if there's like no network or something like that. So we'll do alert item equals alert context dot, we don't actually have this one yet. So let's go to our utilities, alert. I think a lot of these we can reuse some of the alerts we have, but we don't actually have this one. So in our location detail view errors, I'm gonna go ahead and copy, paste this one, and we'll say unable to get checked in status. And then you see, oh, I broke the alignment. Oh my gosh, this pains me. Now, this is the downside of lining up your equal signs, trying to deal with stuff like this. I couldn't think of a shorter name, just to be honest. Watch, it is a pain to just tab, tab, tab. Yes, I know many people are screaming at their screens. This is so inefficient. Why do you do this? No way. But if you count it, that took like 10 seconds. Like who cares? Then we do Command A, Control I to make sure everything else is lined up, and we're done. Small price to pay in my opinion. Now here I will say server error, and I'll say unable to retrieve checked in status of the current user. And then the old slash, please try again. You can say or contact support or whatever you want to put in there. So that's our unable to get check-in status. What did I do wrong? Oh, I need to do slash N, not just a slash. That's not how you do that, Sean. Okay, so now back to location detail view, alert context dot unable to get check-in status. That's the alert we're gonna show there. Now continuing on down the line, update check-in status. So remember, this update check-in status should only fire off if we already have a profile ID, right? The only way we're even showing this button is if they have a profile ID. So this is kind of one of those things that like should never happen, but just in case it does, we're gonna show the alert. So we'll say alert item equals alert context dot unable to get profile. That's we're reusing that one because it's the same error message. Okay, cool. Success case, we don't want to show an error. None of these success cases we want to show an error. I'm gonna get rid of this print statement, just a little bit of cleanup. And then, okay, so failure. This is a fail to save your profile record. So we have one for that already as well. So alert item equals alert context. This is the failure to update profile. So I'm just gonna type update, update profile failure. Cool, and then down here, this failure is the overall failure from fetching the record. So we can say unable to get profile here as well. So alert item equals alert context dot unable to get profile. Or actually, you know what? Let's create a new alert item for this just to be more detailed here. So I'm gonna copy that, paste that. So we'll say unable to check in or out. I think that's more descriptive. So we'll say server error. We are unable to check in / out at this time / and please try again. I think that's more descriptive than unable to get profile, because at the time the user's trying to check in or check out. So when we tell them, hey, we can't check you in, check you out, that's more informative than, hey, we can't get your profile, because they may be able to piece it together, but I think that might be a little confusing. So we'll copy that. Let's go back to the location detail view. And then instead of unable to get profile, unable to check in or out. And then same thing, instead of update profile failure, unable to check in or out. Again, I think it's just a little more descriptive. Unable to get profile here is fine. And then the last one down here in get checked in profiles, we don't have one for that, I believe either. Go back to the alert item. Cool. Okay, one more. Basically unable to get checked in profiles is what we're looking for here. So unable to, hopefully this isn't long enough, get checked in profiles. Oh man, I lined them up too soon. Again, take 10 seconds. 10 seconds isn't that bad, right? That's what I'm gonna tell myself. That's how I justify this. 10 seconds, not the end of the world. Now, if you had 100 of these, but again, hopefully like that's a pretty long title. Hopefully they shouldn't be longer than that. Like you should be able to work a title less than that. That should be as long as they get. Okay, so we'll keep server error and we'll say we were unable to get users checked into this location at this time. Please try again. Cool. Back to location detail view model, and that's what we'll put here for our last alert. Alert item equals alert context dot unable to get checked in profiles. That's what we'll show there. So now do a Command B to make sure we haven't messed anything up. I believe that's all the alerts we're going to handle there. Okay, let's do a quick recap of each file on like what we did. Just a real quick run through because we kind of bounced around a lot. Okay, we'll talk about the UI first in the location detail view. So the first thing we did, right, we had our empty state. where if, hey, there's no profiles checked in, showing a simple text. And then we slap that into a Z stack so we could put a loading view on top of it. And again, I chose to put the loading view on top because we have that little transparency. Because when there is a grid of profile faces and when it's updating, you can still see the grid behind it rather than like removing it all. Again, that's a stylistic design choice that I went with. So that's why we did it that way. And the other little bit of UI here, right? We are hiding our check-in button if our profile record ID is nil, right? They don't have a profile, we don't want to show it. And then we're updating the button accordingly based on the isCheckedIn variable. And then that isCheckedIn variable gets updated. We did this in the last video, like when we update the check-in status, right? We update our isCheckedIn variable down there. What we worked on this video was getting the check-in status on appear of this screen. So essentially all we're doing there is fetching the record, doing a check right here. Hey, is there something at the isCheckedIn property? Is there a reference there? If there's not a reference there, isCheckedIn is false. That means it's nil. If there is a reference there, hey, does that reference record ID equal this location ID? If that is true, isCheckedIn is true. If that is false, isCheckedIn is false, right? So if it's false, that would mean I'm checked into a different location. If it's nil, that means I'm not checked in like anywhere. And then we went through and added our alerts. So that's the quick overview. As always, if you have any questions, leave a comment or hit up the Slack channel. All right, moving on.